we just talked about breathing and how that connection between our diaphragm and our pelvic floor is so important. And that brings us to pelvic floor relaxation.
So important.
We cannot emphasize how important this step is for building that foundation for you to be able to continue to progress and meet your goals. Not only is this pelvic floor relaxation important for your body, mentally, it actually makes a really big difference too. Mm-hmm. So we are going to talk about some of these very simple steps that you can incorporate into your daily routine to get you started on that path for pelvic floor relaxation. And the number one way that we like to do it is recommending that you lay down, get your hips up. So take if you have some firm pillows, mm-hmm. I like blankets, rolled up blankets. Yep. If you have a yoga block in your house somewhere, someone usually has one that they bought one time. Right? Take it out and put it underneath your hips. Put it underneath that flat bone that's your sacrum.
And for some people that might be mm-hmm. a bit, I don't want to say aggressive, but a bit firm, especially if you're having any tailbone pain. So then starts with the blankets and then work your way up to the yoga block. Yeah. Absolutely acceptable. And if that is tender, that kind of tells you something, right? Because you should be able to lay with your hips up on a yoga block and that shouldn't be painful. So just the fact of that being tender kind of should be a little, alert in your brain, oh, maybe there's some tension back here or something that I was completely unaware of.
Right. A lot of this is making your brain aware. We're connecting with an area that either we've never connected with before, or because of pregnancy or trauma or something that has created a disconnect. Because our brain is very good at turning off these signals that they might interpret as painful or stressful. So by getting down and into that hips up position, even if you feel like you cannot connect with your pelvic floor, the sheer mechanics of it, we're taking the pressure off of those pelvic floor. So we're shifting all those organs away from that. And when we focus on that nice slow inhale and slower exhale, if you can do it, if you can make that exhale just a little bit slower than the inhale, that actually turns on the relaxation center in our brain. It activates that really powerful vagus nerve. So just that act, of doing that slow inhale, slower exhale with your hips up just a little bit.
Because we're never anti-gravity, really. I mean, if you think about our pelvic floors, they are a great stabilizer for us. They activate with every motion that we make, and we are spending the vast majority of our day either sitting or standing. Both positions are putting the pressure of gravity in the pelvic organs against that pelvic floor. So if we can get into a position where we are actually gravity eliminated, if that your pelvis can be kind of pointed up a little bit, you're just actually giving it a break for the first time in the day. One of the things I will encourage patients to do is to find, you can go online and you can find a meditation, or you can find just, even just a song that you really enjoy, that you personally find relaxing. I don't care what genre of music it is. But that's normally 2-3 minutes. And if you can just get into that hips up position, do some nice deep breaths, listen to either the words or the affirmations or the meditation or the music that you find relaxing, that is going to be great for your pelvic floor. It's going to be great for the vagus nerve. It's going to be great for getting oxygen through your body, nutrients into that bloodstream, and just being in that kind of gravity eliminated position for just a couple minutes. And yes, ideally, if you can work up towards being able to purposely feel that pelvic floor relax, that is great. But even at the beginning, don't get frustrated. Just being in that position and doing the nice, gentle, deep breathing can be a game changer.
Yeah, your body will thank you.
Absolutely. And we are going to add a supplemental video to this course, so it will be included, that kind of walks you through some more with that pelvic floor relaxation, showing, us in the position and kind of going through it a little bit more step by step for people that really are more the visual learners. So that will be attached.
Yep. And this kind of brings us along to why our pelvic floor needs to be relaxed in order to get an effective Kegel. Because this is why women who are experiencing stress incontinence, so that leaking with impact or activity, and they've come to us and said, I've done Kegels. Like I've
done them for years.
And they're not working. This is part of the why.
Yes, absolutely. And the other part, so why do 1,000 Kegels not necessarily work? One, if that pelvic floor is being held in tension, that's not going to be your friend. Two, because it's not just about the pelvic floor, it's about that pressure system as a whole. And three, are you performing your Kegels correctly? And time and time again, we are seeing in clinic that a lot of women are not. So as pelvic rehab providers, we are trained in performing internal assessments.
Right.
So with a vaginal internal assessment, we can really feel, we can really palpate what muscles are contracting and what muscles are not. And I can tell you that time and time again, I have had women come into my office that tell me that they absolutely 100% for sure are performing Kegels correctly. And when we do an internal assessment, I am getting minimal to no squeeze around my finger, which is technically those pelvic floor muscles if I have a finger placed gently vaginally. And maybe nothing around my finger, but we're seeing like abs turn on like crazy, or glutes really contract, or the adductors kind of squeeze the legs together. Those larger supplemental muscles are completely kicking in, and very, very little at the pelvic floor itself.
Right.
So again, those are the three primary reasons that, the magical Kegels may not be working for you. We need to relax that pelvic floor so you can contract it. We need to work with how you're breathing and what position your body is in when you're doing the activities that are making you leak. Or, do we truly have an effective Kegel or not?
And we want to think about how that all works as part of that pressure system. So we talked about when you're doing a Kegel, if you're activating a lot of those like larger accessory muscles, like your butt, your abs, your back too. People grip, believe it or not. Like if you're standing at like the kitchen sink, do a quick check-in and see like, where are you holding tension? You shouldn't need to grip your back, your belly muscles, your hip muscles. None of those should feel like they're on like and tight while you're doing a gentle activity. Our pelvic floor doesn't work in isolation. It works as part of a pressure system. And when we talk about a pressure system, we talk about like a canister.
Yes.
Right. So we start with our diaphragm at the top of our pressure system. Our pelvic floor is at the bottom. We've got our abdominals at the front, and then we have our back muscles, which are behind us. So that kind of think of like a soda can. If we have too much pressure at the top, so say our abdominals are gripping, our diaphragm's not working effectively.
So what does that sound like? That sounds like how a lot of people are taught to lift. You're going to lift something. So brace your abs really tight, and then, either hold your breath, either you're taught that, or some people just kind of naturally use that diaphragm for stability. So then, okay, you're bracing your abs really tight. So that's a pressure in. You're breath holding. That's a pressure down. And all of that pressure is going to go towards the back or the pelvic floor. Now, this isn't just necessarily a pattern that we see in women. We see it in men a lot. But because they have additional sphincters and closer together muscles, we see a lot more back and disc issues. But that's still a pressure management system issue, right? So it's the same overall problem, just kind of presenting at the different weaker link of the body. So again, when you are working that pressure system together, you want to make sure that you're elongated through your trunk. So if you are going to lift something and you are what we call crushing the can, right? We just talked about your core is your canister, the core is your can. Are you crushing your can? That is going to affect your pressure system. If you can stay elongated through the trunk, that is going to give you a much happier pressure system. Okay?
It should feel like a natural kind of like a corset, like some like a support that's wrapping around 360 degrees. You shouldn't feel like you have a lot of like pressure or heaviness when you're doing any of those activities. And when you're doing that nice deep inhale, we're creating more space. So there's more room in that pressure system, and there's less pressure down on our bladder and our pelvic floor, which can only do so much.
Yeah, even the strongest of pelvic floors can only take so much pressure, especially if it's a repetitive pressure, whether that is an exercise activity that you're doing, or, you know, maybe for work, you have to lift multiple boxes in a row. And that's where it's going to be really important that we're taking a look at the mechanics of how you're lifting, the mechanics of how you're breathing, and then that ability to purposely contract that pelvic floor when you are doing the activity and then relax it following. So again, and if you're not sure about that pelvic floor contraction, you certainly can reach out to a local pelvic floor therapist. You can also do a bit of a check yourself. And while I have had plenty of patients look at me like I'm crazy, the best way to really feel is to place a finger internally vaginally. And if the thought of that makes you really uncomfortable, I invite you to kind of try to peel back some of the layers for that discomfort. Because again, if we are trying to connect your brain to your pelvic floor and your first thought when you hear, oh, place a finger vaginally is, oh no, I'm not doing that. Okay, that tells us right there that there's going to be there is some sort of block between your brain and your pelvic floor automatically. And maybe kind of pulling back some of the reasoning why and working through that a little bit. But if you're placing a finger vaginally and you're doing a pelvic floor contraction, you should feel a nice squeeze 360 degrees around that finger on all 3 layers of pelvic floor muscles, right? So basically the entire width of the finger.
And not only by doing that, you're again building that connection between your brain and your pelvic floor by placing something internally, like whether it's your finger or even like next time you put in a tampon. Think about that. You know, are you able to squeeze and lift around that whole tampon?
And it should definitely feel like a lift. If you squeeze and it feels like you're pushing that tampon or feels like you're pushing that finger out, that is a downward pressure. And that is actually a motor pattern that I have seen quite a bit clinically. And that is absolutely setting up for incontinence, because if you're having a downward pressure, that is not going to be particularly